In March 2016, a fishing trawler capsized and bobbed helplessly in the churning South Atlantic after Argentine coastguard cutters opened fire. The vessel had refused to stop despite radio warnings, even attempting to ram the patrol boats during a high-speed chase through contested fishing waters. With no clear options left and the crew endangering the cutters, for the first time in maritime enforcement history, Argentina had authorized deadly force against an illegal fishing vessel. The dramatic rescue images, released by the Argentine Navy, served as both warning and spectacle. But the question remained: which country dared to test Argentina's resolve over a handful of squid? An exclusive economic zone is a nation's claim to wealth beneath the waves. Created through the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, an EEZ stretches from the edge of a country's territorial waters out to 200 nautical miles. Inside this zone, a nation controls what's under the surface: fish, oil, gas, even the potential for wind and tidal energy. At the same time, the surface is open to anyone. Ships from around the world can pass through freely, a neutral highway above the nation's claimed territory. Decades before the convention, countries like the United States, Chile, and Peru were staking claims beyond their shores. The 200 nautical mile rule gave nations a clear, enforceable zone where they could manage fisheries, drill for energy, and assert sovereignty without claiming the oceans themselves. Argentina's exclusive economic zone stretches over 1.5 million square kilometers of South Atlantic waters, nourished by cold currents that attract vast schools of squid, a species vital both to local fisheries and global markets. These waters are among the most productive squid grounds in the world, making them a focal point for foreign fleets seeking high-value catches. Poachers are a constant presence here. Fleets from around the world push into restricted zones, chasing the rising demand for seafood. In the process, they put even more strain on ecosystems that are already under heavy stress. In 2013, a Chinese vessel was intercepted near Puerto Madryn, its holds packed with 180 tons of fresh squid, constituting an illegal catch so massive it could have supplied entire markets for weeks. By February 2016, the situation had escalated. The Chinese trawler Huali 8 was detected deep inside Argentina's EEZ. Argentine coastguard ships hailed the vessel over radio channels in both Spanish and English and attempted to stop it with warning measures. However, the trawler ignored the calls and continued toward international waters. The chase began. The trawler surged forward as the Coast Guard gave pursuit. For 4 days, the cat-and-mouse game stretched across hundreds of miles of open ocean. Huali 8 darted toward Uruguayan waters, banking on a safe haven, only to swing back into Argentina's seas under the cover of night. When Huali 8 finally reached international waters on March 3, 2016, the Argentine cutters were forced to break off the pursuit. The vessel had escaped, but the episode highlighted the growing challenge of enforcing sovereignty over such a vast and remote maritime zone. On the morning of March 14, 2016, the Argentinian Coast Guard ship Derbez spotted a large red and white fishing vessel drifting across the waters near Port Madryn, a small fishing city in Patagonia of about 70,000 people. The crew quickly recognized it as Luan Yanu 10, a Chinese trawler operating illegally inside Argentina's EEZ. Incognito vessels such as this had been plundering seas around the world to meet China's skyrocketing seafood demand, hitting the Atlantic and Pacific coasts with particular intensity. The Derbez hailed the trawler over radio channels, ordering it to stop. Silence was the only answer they received. A subsequent chase that was caught on film began when the trawler cut its lights and headed toward international waters, seemingly determined to escape with what the Argentinians assumed were tons of illegally caught squid. Finding themselves in need of escalating their response, the Argentinians fired warning shots that lit the chill of the Patagonian Sea. The trawler ignored them and swerved repeatedly toward its pursuer, attempting to ram the Argentine vessel. In the face of danger, the Argentinian crew fired directly at the hull before it could make contact. Water poured in through breaches in the vessel, spreading rapidly as the trawler began to list. Amid the spray and the tilt of the sinking trawler, 4 crew members, including the captain, were hauled to safety by the Argentine coastguard aboard the Debris. Meanwhile, the remaining 28 sailors scrambled toward 2 other Chinese vessels that had arrived nearby, climbing aboard as the trawler's hull disappeared beneath the ocean. Against the odds, every single crew member survived, a remarkable outcome given the ferocity of the sinking. News outlets around the world aired footage of the trawler sinking and the dramatic rescue, fueling debates over maritime law and how it should be enforced. Argentina, however, cited a long history of illegal incursions into its waters, emphasizing that this was not an act of aggression, but a necessary defense of its sovereign rights. Stepping back from the South Atlantic, a global pattern emerges. China now commands the largest distant water fishing fleet on the planet. It's a sprawling armada that stretches across oceans, from Latin America to West Africa, from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. What drove this expansion was the fact that domestic stocks have collapsed over the past decade. As local waters failed to provide enough food, Chinese fleets were sent farther and farther afield, following squid, tuna, and other high-value species into foreign seas. Assisted by a complex bureaucracy and well-connected embassies, these fleets held licenses to fish in multiple countries, but repeatedly entered restricted EEZs when it suited them. Authorities, experts, and organizations such as Oceana warn that global seafood demand and declining stocks are creating a combustible environment, and China's fleet is at the center. The boats push the limits of diplomacy, sometimes ignoring warnings, refusing to communicate, and crossing into protected waters without hesitation. Indonesia has taken an even harsher route against illegal fishing. When authorities catch a Chinese vessel in their waters, they destroy it. Explosives are set aboard the ship, and moments later, the hulls are blown apart in fiery explosions, leaving nothing but splintered wreckage on the waves. Officials describe the actions as necessary by saying, quote, "What the Chinese boats are doing is not fishing. It is transnational organized crime." Even in the middle of this climate, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Luan lodged urgent representations with Argentina, demanding a full investigation, assurances of crew safety, and measures to prevent any repetition. Argentina made it clear it wanted to prevent similar incidents and keep tensions from rising. While the immediate crisis was managed, deeper issues, illegal fishing and disputes over maritime boundaries, continued to put a strain on relations between the two countries. Nearly a decade after the Luan Yanu 10 incident, Argentina still faced the same challenge, protecting its rich waters from foreign fleets willing to flout the law. It was against this backdrop that on one late evening in February 2025, the Argentine PC-3 Orion cut through the South Atlantic sky, banking sharply above a vast, glowing expanse of water. Below, hundreds of fishing vessels stretched as far as the eye could see, their lights piercing the darkness like a floating constellation. This floating city is in reality a concentrated armada of foreign boats, mostly Chinese, crowding the edge of Argentina's EEZ. Nearly 200 Chinese vessels, part of a distant water fishing network that stretches across oceans, were observed hunting squid, a cornerstone of both the local ecosystem and Argentina's fishing economy. The lights used to attract squid are so bright that they're visible from space, turning the night into a surreal spectacle of human industry. Some vessels are even linked to US-sanctioned companies with histories of human rights abuses and illegal fishing elsewhere. For Argentina, the threat is deeply personal. Local fishermen, limited to about 70 to 75 licensed boats, watch their catches shrink as foreign fleets pull squid from the edge of the EEZ, putting both their livelihoods and the marine ecosystem at risk. The Navy and Coast Guard deployed P-3C and C-12 aircraft, corvettes, and cutters along the Mila 200 line, attempting to track, hail, and when necessary, board vessels that refused to comply. Still, many vessels shut off their trackers, cross into neighboring waters, or disappear into the high seas, where Argentina has no authority. Patrols can disrupt and discourage them, but they can't fully stop the industrial-scale intrusion. What began as a single dramatic clash has turned into a drawn-out test of Argentina's resolve, with every patrol, interception, and warning folded into the larger fight to defend its waters.